So many people have been speaking about the climate crisis. So many things have been put on paper. But the real question is, why is it that we're still not acting at the scale and speed that is necessary?
What we want to see at COP27 is moving pledges into implementation. Every stakeholder needs to step up and push forward.
The extreme weather events that the scientists have long connected to the climate crisis are becoming far more frequent and far more destructive.
The climate crisis is a threat multiplier, which means it exacerbates existing inequities in our society. The impacts are felt most deeply by Black, Indigenous, and communities of color.
We're living through an explosion of inequality. We need to remember we're on the same planet, and this is the planet that we need to make sustainable for the whole of humanity.
Climate change is impacting food security as well as political stability in many nations around the world. 5 years ago, there were 80 million people marching towards starvation. That number jumped to 135 million. What caused the jump? It was man-made conflict, like in Ukraine, compounded with climate shocks.
No one is as vulnerable to climate change as farmers are. If you talk transformation, the first thing they want to know is, what must I do on my farm?
This Sharm el-Sheikh COP is the moment to set up monitoring and accountability mechanisms and put money on the table to help developing countries to accelerate towards decarbonizing.
We know that this transition will require a fast adoption of a lot of new technologies. And the question today is how to find the appropriate way to finance this technology.
To put a number around it, it's an extra $2.5 to $3 trillion a year of additional finance that we have to find in order to get those emissions down.
Financial institutions have a lot of roles to play to bring the advice and provide the financing to make these transitions happen.
Younger generations are demanding a sense of purpose. They want to look at companies and say, I am investing with you all for this reason.
With 2 COPs taking place in Africa and the Middle East, we have this tremendous opportunity to put emerging markets at the forefront of our collective response to climate change.
International trade has to be part of the solution. How do we all get together to talk about a global carbon price that can guide us and help us to decarbonize the world?
The solutions are there. What we need is governments to regulate, to invest, and we need business to act with values.
History will look at us, people, politicians, corporate leaders. These times requires not only solutions, but speed.
There is nowhere else to look than the mirror. We are the ones that need to do this.
Hi everyone and welcome to this World Economic Forum special event. My name is Dan Murphy. I'm an anchor and correspondent with CNBC based here in the Middle East region. And we are thrilled to have you join us from the region and around the world as we get into this conversation at the Sharm el-Sheikh COP27 conference now underway. Today we're going to be talking about food and food security, which is a critical issue on the agenda here at COP27. For the first time, we're going to be focusing in on the food systems agenda here at the event. And this is a critical issue. Even before the pandemic, hunger has been on the rise because of poverty, a growing population, conflict, and of course, climate change. Finally, the entire value chain of the sector has a voice. But is it being heard? We're going to discuss over the next 45 minutes. Joining me today in conversation is David Livingston. He is the Senior Advisor to US Special Envoy for Climate, John Kerry. Also joining me today is Gilberto Tomazoni, the CEO of JBS. It is the world's largest producer of beef, chicken and lamb. Also joining us shortly is Erin Fitzgerald, the Chief Executive Officer of the US Farmers and Ranchers in Action Group out of the USA. And joining us live down the line as well is Sam Cass. He is both a chef and nutritional policy expert. He's a partner at Acre Venture Partners, which is a VC fund investing in the future of food. He was also the personal chef to the Obamas. So to set the scene for our conversation today, I'd first like to invite David to kick things off. who can give us some context into the intersection of food, energy and climate change this year and some of the solutions that are being explored in the United States. David, always great to see you. Great to have you on the panel. Let's kick it off.
Thanks very much, Dan. It's great to be with you again. Well, obviously, agriculture and food systems are at the forefront of COP27. I think that's no mistake. They've always been integral. They've always been, in many ways, at the forefront of climate impacts and climate disruption when we think about desertification, acidification of oceans and the impacts on aquaculture, floods, storms, severe weather events that impact agriculture systems. But this year, we're also seeing that compounded, of course, by Russia's brutal invasion of Ukraine and the knock-on effects that's having on food input, food and fertilizer markets around the world. What it, I think, helps to underscore and focus minds on here in Sharm el-Sheikh is the fact that we can't achieve our climate goals in this sector, both making agriculture and food systems more climate resilient, but also making them more carbon efficient by doing so in a way that demands trade-offs. We need to expand the frontier of possibilities. We need to make sure that we can address climate change and make these food systems more climate resilient in a way that addresses the 800 million people today that are still hungry. So it's that reason why the United States is leaning into a variety of different initiatives that are about mobilizing new forms of finance, mobilizing new forms of partnerships, public-private partnerships and otherwise, to help to sort of tackle these challenges head on. I'll name one, the Agriculture Innovation Mission for Climate, which we launched at COP26 last year in Glasgow. And now 1 year on, it's already doubled the amount of investment that it's getting governments to put in to climate-smart agriculture innovation. From $4 billion last year to $8 billion in new investment commitments that we'll be announcing very shortly.
Okay, so doubling that commitment. David, just while we have you, how important is it for farmers and for the industry to finally have a voice at a platform like this?
It's critically important. And I would note that it's not just the farm sector, but it's also smallholder farmers as a group. We actually are looking to invite more farmer-led initiatives in Agriculture Innovation Mission for Climate, because oftentimes it's actually not the United States government or any government around the world who knows best how to make food and agriculture systems more resilient or more efficient. It's actually farmers and ranchers. And we need to listen to their voices telling us what technologies they need, what innovations they need, and how governments, philanthropies, and a constellation of public and private actors can help create the enabling environment for our farmers and ranchers to help deliver on those goals.
David, really appreciate your insights on the panel. Thank you so much for joining us, and also looking forward to seeing you at the next COP in the UAE as well. So thanks for your insights and for setting the scene for our conversation. I wanted to also bring in our first guest now. Gilberto is here, and Gilberto, you know, I was also speaking with the Director General of the World Trade Organization earlier on this week to get some insights on what's happening on the ground, and she said that food security is probably the biggest concern and most critical issue that she has heading into next year. It tops her agenda of the things that she is most worried about. So as an operator, what are some of the things that you're seeing on the ground right now?
I cannot hear you.
You can't hear me? Okay, let me come a little closer. How do you think food systems are being impacted by climate change today? Take it away.
Okay. I think to reinforce the importance that in this COP27, the discussion is not just with the government, it was the other actors. That makes a difference because it's a different perspective. It makes a lot of difference in terms of to address the solution. We see that is net zero. When talk about food security, is not the same thing. Food security, because we are talking about to feed the people, we talk about to take care of the environment, and this makes a difference because we will be 9.8 billion people. We need to do both things. We need to produce more, and at the same time, you need to reduce these emissions. And we have knowledge, and we have tools that have proven that we can do both. We can produce more, and at the same time we can reduce the emissions. And important, we have some examples, the agricultural regenerations and the integration between crops and livestock and forests. We can produce 40% more than already existing solutions for that. What we need to support the farmers, because the farmers should be compensated for all of this work they are doing. And the other point, we are really focused on provide assistance to these farmers in order they can make the transition.
Gilberto, are there any key concerns that are keeping you awake at nighttime over at JBS? What worries you the most about food security today?
Well, the most for food security today, it's to be sure that we can feed the world, because we see as the largest food company in the world the responsibility that to supply, to put food in the plate of the millions of people around the world. And one is important is stop deforestation. We are tracking all our value chain in order not to have deforestation in our process. The other thing is support the farmers. We put in the ground team to support the transition of the farmer in terms of be more aware about new technology and in the same time to be in compliance with our programs.
Thank you, Gilberto. And Erin Fitzgerald also joins the conversation now. Erin, great to see you. Thanks for being here. So give us some insight into what your members are saying about the current environment and what they're doing to safeguard against some of the challenges that David has outlined and that Gilberto has explained.
Yeah, so happy to be here today representing U.S. farmers and ranchers in action. You know, many of our farmers they're going through tough times all around the world. Clearly a lot of uncertainty going on in the markets, and also feeling a little bit that they're under attack when they're really part of the solution. You know, I always say that our farmers have been reducing, taking care of the soil, and they also have the heart really on stewardship and sustainability. They're a capable workforce. We just need to be able to make certain that they're included in these conversations ongoing and really seen as the solution to sequester and also unleash the power of bioproducts that are on our farms.
And for you, how important is it now that finally the value chain has a voice at a platform like COP27?
Yeah, it's really exciting to be here. You know, as a marked difference from last year's COP, that food systems is really front and center. And I would say nutrition security, I think we are hearing quite a bit about for the first time. I think during COVID, we all learned we could do without a lot, right? But food was not one of them. And unfortunately, for much of the world, even in the United States, nutrition security is continually at our doorstep. And many of our farmers say the old expression, we need to plant our seeds now. And I think this is the implementation COP. I think that we're on day 2. The question will be is how do we implement and really put the solutions in the hands of our farmers and make certain they're included at the table.
Exactly, and we'll get to some of those conversations in just a moment. I also wanted to bring Sam into the conversation as well. Sam, welcome in. Let's get straight over to you. How vulnerable do you think food systems are today? And I hope you can hear me over there.
Look, I think our food system is completely vulnerable. It's vulnerable in a couple ways. One, it's, continues to be one of the leading drivers of emissions and environmental degradation in the world. And unfortunately, unlike, transportation or energy, our emissions from food and agriculture is going straight up. There's no curve, down on top. We have a ton of work to do to address this to kind of catch up to the rest of the economy that's been doing for good years. And part of the reason study's been forgotten and I was in COP21, trying to beat it done around food there, and it wasn't being discussed at all. I'm very happy to see, the progress being made, but we have a lot of work to do. On the other hand, food and agriculture is definitely on the front lines and being easily disrupted by all of the various weather events and routes and heat waves and floods, et cetera. And so we're going to have to do a lot to help support our producers to be able to not only just mitigate the worst effects of climate change, but start to then resource them and pay them to help us solve the problem. I think that food and agriculture and our producers are really our only, I firmly believe, agriculture is our only chance to mitigate the worst of climate change. We've missed the chance to just reduce our emissions as a global economy. We now have to figure out ways to sequester massive amounts of gigatons, hundreds of gigatons of carbon out of the atmosphere. And the only system that has the ability to do that in the time horizon that the science says we have is agriculture and food. We have a huge opportunity before us, but we have a lot of work to do to put the pieces in place to realize that potential.
Yeah, exactly. And Sam, we're going to touch on the investment opportunity and where you're deploying capital later on in this session as well. So sit tight with us. I wanted to bring the conversation back over to Gilberto, though. And Gilberto, we know that climate change and the war in Ukraine has made growing conditions increasingly volatile for food security. So what is the private sector and a business like JBS doing to accelerate the adoption of climate-smart agriculture practices by farmers?
We are working in a partnership with our farmers, our suppliers. We put in place a blockchain in order to have full traceability of all of our operations. And in addition, we support technical assistance, and with cooperation with some financial institute, we supply financial to the farmers, then they can make the transition. Because we know that if we adopt sustainable practices, you are able to produce much more than we produce without sustainable practice. Then food insecurity not make sense when we know that we can produce more and still to reduce the emissions. Then it's logical to the farmer adapt, because they need to have advantage for that. And for that, we need to supply a regular basis the assistance to the farmers and supply research that they can make the transition, because depend of the size of the farmers. They have funds or they have funds. The smallholders really is really what must suffer. Then we need to focus our protection for them. And then you need to be in cooperation with the government, with the companies, with the private sector, with NGOs, all of them, because this is, for us, we talk about food security, we talk about the life, and there is no reason to increase the cost. We need to produce more with less.
So this goes back to this idea of using climate-smart agricultural practices. What more would you like to see from policymakers and from governments to support businesses like yours in that endeavour?
It's important understand the context, because one region is different to the other region.
Of course.
When we have big farmers, we have small farmers. Big farmers, they need less support. Could be, of course, if they give some incentive to accelerate the adaptation. But the small one, they don't know how to do. It's more basic things you need to support. When you talk about technical assistance, we talk about to go there and tell them how they can do, and then make a support for them to make the investment, make the transitions. Then, for me, it's case to case, one case in one case, one region to the other region. The focus is to understand the real situation, is to be with the farmers.
And Aaron, would you like to speak to that as well? We know producers are essential when it comes to action on climate mitigation. So what are some of the key trends, themes, opportunities that you're hearing coming out of COP27?
Well, first of all, climate-smart agriculture is such a unique thing, because I think that many people don't necessarily understand how food is grown and produced today. And so we go back to 4th or 6th grade biology, right? Our plants are the only living machine that can pull carbon out of the atmosphere. And then the question is, how can our farmers deploy this technology and innovation that's happening on our farms? So it all starts with the soils and our plants, and of course our animals. And we know now, science does tell us, that we not only reduce our carbon footprint, but it is likely that by 2035 we could be minus 4% carbon negative. So what does that mean? That means that we're the first sector that can reduce our footprint and have a handprint in the transition to a net zero economy. But it is going to take innovation and, most importantly, financial innovation throughout that supply chain to help our farmers deploy this technology. They they have the heart, they have the will, but quite often are missing the economic business model to deploy this technology. We've seen a lot of great advancements on our farm. We're finding out the power of our soil, genetics, different types of bio-based products, manure coupled with food waste can power whole towns and villages. So lots of opportunity and innovation on our farm, but we really need the financial sector to take a hard look at this sector as a key investment into the transition to a net zero economy.
So how do you create incentives for more financial access into the industry? I guess that's the key question there. How do you generate interest as well?
Yeah, well, so I really look at it like back in 2007, the renewable energy sector, for example, really called on the financial community to partner with them to help support the growth of the renewable energy sector. We know that we need to have finance at the table. 2% of total investment, ESG investment, is only going to food and agriculture. So when I think about taking a portfolio-based approach to solving climate solutions, clearly we can do more from the private sector in investing in our farmers. They're capable, they're an eco workforce, they're ready to be deployed. We also have the innovation and technology here. Why wait for Elon when we can start mobilizing our farmer workforce?
Right, exactly. So, interesting point you make there, Erin. I wanted to bring Sam back into the conversation here. And Sam, can you please react to what you've just heard? And in particular, explain to me how and where you're deploying capital in this sector. What makes an attractive investment?
Yeah, well, as always, I completely agree with everything that Erin said. I think there's huge opportunities that we're seeing from an investment standpoint on the technology innovation side for innovations that are going to dramatically help producers and growers sequester really significant amounts of carbon. And I think importantly, do so in a way that improves the permanence of that carbon. One of the issues that has plagued soil carbon sequestration is an area that has gotten a real consensus is the debate around the permanence and how long that carbon is going to stay in the soil. But we've invested in a company called Loam Bio that's helping. Yep. Can you hear me?
Yeah, finish your thoughts. I'm sorry, I jumped in early there. Go ahead.
That sequester between 1 and 3 tons of additional carbon per acre per year and stored in very permanent form. To be a transformational breakthrough for producers, and producers can now get paid quite a significant additional profit, maybe 2 times what they're already making for starting to farm carbon. We're also seeing big breakthroughs around methane and animals. JBS obviously has a lot of footprint in their ruminants because of the methane that's released from cows and sheep. We're seeing some pretty powerful innovations around eliminating those emissions. Those kind of technologies, I think, could pretty fundamentally transform the footprint of the system and start pulling down massive amounts of carbon in the next 5 years. Like, this is not something that's decades away. This is years away, and that's the kind of timeline that we're on. We are completely out of time.
Sam, can you give us some more insight into how much, in terms of value, that you've actually deployed into the sector, and maybe some more examples of businesses that are starting to pay dividends for you, or investments that are starting to pay dividends? What's working and what's not?
Yeah, we invest on the early side. We still think there's a lot of innovation and just sort of fundamental technologies that need to be developed. And we're seeing a lot of things work. We have an incredibly successful company called Inari that's focused on plant genetics, lightening the footprint of agriculture. We have a company called Meaty that's an alternative protein company that is producing not just a very affordable, high protein food, but it's also the most nutrient dense food I've ever seen. We have a company called Planet 4 that's helping food companies decarbonize their entire supply chain. These are the kind of underpinning technologies that we think are absolutely critical to enable the system to decarbonize. Now, we believe and are seeing that the companies that are helping to solve the biggest problem are the ones that are going to make the most money and provide a biggest return for investors. And consumers are definitely telling us, especially young ones, that they're going to vote with their dollars. They want to support companies who are helping to solve climate change and helping to produce nutrient-dense food. And that combination is very, very powerful. I think we're starting to see more capital come into the space, particularly on the later stage on growth rounds and the bigger private equity folks. We need still a drop in the bucket. This is the biggest industry in the world, the biggest employer in the world, has the biggest potential to solve this problem. We still are just a minuscule investment about what's needed and what's possible. And I do believe that the returns, as we can reinvent our economy, is going to prove out to be a big winner. So.
Indeed, and in many ways it's an investment that is ultimately solving a problem, so you'll have ESG credentials as well. But Sam, just to elaborate a little further on this, you mentioned that it is just a drop in the ocean. We're talking about the value amount of investment going into the sector as it stands, at least from a technological perspective. How do you encourage further investment in the space? We heard from David earlier talking about the billions that is going in from a policy support level. Is that enough to encourage more investment, do you think?
I do think governments, and David and I have talked a bunch about this and hope to do some more on it. I mean, I think government can play an important role in de-risking some of these innovations and technologies, providing grants or supports to help get these technologies out in the world. And the more that kind of partnership is enabled, the less risk that investors see to come in. I do think we just have to have some big wins. You know, the more big return that some people get, I think then other parts of capital will start to come in. I think we need to start setting a carbon price. There needs to be a more robust carbon market. I think carbon is our gateway drug into a much more robust economy around transforming our agricultural system. When we have that and farmers can start to see real returns for cleaning the practices, we're going to see an ability to adopt these new technologies in a way that doesn't exist right now. When people can adopt technologies more efficiently, because right now the adoption curve takes quite a long time from an investment standpoint. As we increase the adoption curve because farmers are making more money by doing the right thing, you're going to see more money start to flow into the space, more technology starting to come to light, much more rapid pace of transition, and dollars will flow from that. So I think it's a really important piece. And without a real robust carbon market and a really strong carbon price, I think we simply will not have the infrastructure aligned to move as fast as we need to. And I do think the last thing I'd say is carbon will then lead us into valuing other parts of the natural world in ways that we're not. Right now, the market only values what we extract. We need to start valuing biodiversity and water and soil and all kinds of other parts of the foundation of life on Earth. Without that, we're not going to protect it and value it from an economic standpoint. I think carbon is our first step, and it will lead us to a much more accurate assessment of the natural resources and the value to the economy.
Indeed, Sam, thank you. And Aaron, I wanted to come back over to you. Do you want to react to what you've just heard? And also, what do you see as some of the other critical issues that COP as a platform can address for this sector?
Yeah, I love this idea of investment, of course, that's coming front and center in agriculture. I think it's going to be more than carbon credits. Carbon credits needs to be a stack in the financial solution for our farmers, but at the kitchen table for our farmers, how are we really solving for them? Each harvest season when they go out, right, they're really putting a lot of their livelihood on the line and also making an investment 5, 10 years down the road. So really having that long-term supply chain lens, which Gilberto talked a lot about, and long-term different types of investment, and then risk mitigation. This is the sector that is most at risk to climate change, yet equally the most sector that can solve it. We are seeing increased effects of climate change. 8 out of the last 10 harvest seasons have been faced with extreme and episodic events. This year, on top of market uncertainty, and in the United States alone, facing a critical drought. So we need a lot more innovation and technology. We need to support our farmers as well on the full financial package, which is investment and risk mitigation solutions. And then, of course, carbon credits for their value in really contributing to ecosystem services. But we've got to support our farmers. And I'll say this, And investment in agriculture is not just a carbon solution. This is about nutrition security, of which is national security, which is regional security, as well as global security. We must invest in our farmers now so that by 2030 we do have a carbon pathway, but most importantly, we have a people pathway to resiliency in the face of climate change.
Gilberto, I can see you nodding your head. Do you agree with that?
Sorry?
I saw you nodding your head. Do you agree with that?
Yes, I agree on that. I think it's important protect the farmers, different models, because they take a risk to produce, and the way that they are today, they have only sometimes when the crop is so good, the price is so low, they not cover the cost. Some price they not produce, the price is so high that we need to create a mechanism that support the farmers in a constant way, not just in a short way. And the other point, I totally agree with Henry, that it's not just carbon credit, but carbon credit. Really, if you are able to bring carbon credit to the small producer, will make a huge difference in terms of the small producer, because they can have on the top of the revenue they have more credit card. Then become more reliable and more sustainable the system. I think this is really important, and I believe that COP27 will be talking the Article 6 about that. I think it will be important because we need to find a way to bring money to support the transitions of the farms. I think this is the key point, not just transition in terms of supply knowledge, tools, and money. I think this is a big point, it's an important point. If we can accelerate the process for the green transition, because we can produce more with less. We have the conditions. There is not a conflict in terms of to increase the production and be sustainable. We can do both.
Can we just pick up on one point that the panel seems to be agreeing on, which is this issue of carbon credits? What is the correct framework for that to see progress and advancement moving forward, and what have been the barriers? Area, do you want to speak to that first?
Well, there's a lot of carbon markets being born overnight, really, and I think it's still very much the Wild West. Our farmers are quite confused by it. There's still a little bit of lack of transparency, both on the time frame for these carbon credits, the type of data that's being requested, and then really, to me, a market's only available if there's transparency in that market, and quite often our farmers don't necessarily see that transparency, so I think there's just a little bit of question about that. And then again, if you just look at the price of what is needed at the farm gate, the kitchen table, I get very simple about this, like just looking at a P&L for our farmer, it's the carbon credit. There needs to be more real innovation at that financial perspective, long-term sustainable supply chain relationships. Again, many of our farmers are paid season by season as opposed to a long-term contract, and then really making certain that financing is at the table and risk solution. So carbon credits is, I would say, part of the solution. It cannot be seen as the silver bullet. We need to really package a whole financial solution. Government, of course, is part of it, but when we're talking about the dollars we're looking at, it's got to come from both finance and the supply chain partners.
One of the other issues that arises here is not just identifying issues in food security, but also identifying challenges on the demand side as well. What we've seen in recent years is a shift towards the things that we eat, a change in the things that we eat, like less meat, for example, more plants, more food alternatives. What does that mean for farmers? Are they pivoting along with changing trends, or do they see this as a barrier?
So there's also a lot of noise in the consumer market. So I say the number one way you can partner with a farmer, right, is eat smart. Don't take too much on your plate. You know, the American dinner plate has gone from 9 inches to 11 on average. So if you take too much, that's 10% of your food print. Then 30 to 40% when you walk in the grocery, you just throw it away. You throw the food away. It's like you don't realize that food is a natural resource harvested from our lands, our farmers' hard-working lands. Treat it as a natural resource, and then make certain you have a handprint in your economy in your local community, 1 out of 6 Americans, we're talking a global conference even more, are food insecure. So use food to good, and then count on your farmer to really be part of that carbon solution. Get to know your farmer, know that they're implementing new climate changes, and really think about it as that virtuous cycle. So don't take too much, don't waste it, give to your neighbor, and help your farmer be that carbon solution.
So do you think meat alternatives, though, can be part of the solution?
I mean, protein first is critical, but I think taking that diet-based approach, you're almost losing the whole lifestyle approach that's really needed in a conversation of sustainability. And it's such a small fraction of the solution. Protein in general in the United States is total about 2 to 4%. So, you know, if you're taking, like, and you're going on Meatless Monday or something, it's such a small percentage. I mean, if you get on an American Airlines flight, you know, by that time you've already outdone that. So just really take a more holistic approach. Food is something that is valued. We have in the United States, we're one of the only countries that have Thanksgiving. You know, honor our harvest. There's a lot of hard work that went into that. So don't take too much. Don't waste it. Give to your neighbors. A lot of food insecure, especially right now. And partner with your farmer on the cart. That's the easiest solution. And by the way, that's on the back of a World War II poster my grandmother had in her house. So it's kind of old wisdom that is now.
Fantastic. I like it. Gilberto, just while we're on this topic, can I have your view on that as well? What do you think of these meat alternatives and food alternatives that are really coming up through the younger generation? What does it mean for a business like JBS?
Oh, we are investing in plant-based. We are invested in cultivated meat. We are in chicken, pork, beef, lamb, value-added. We are in all proteins. Our focus is to supply what the consumers want to eat. This is the main point. Of course, we see that plant-based and it's a start to grow, but there's a lot of challenge in order in terms of nutrition, because we not just compare quantity of food, we need to compare the quality of the nutrition. That will be in terms of taste and in terms of cost. Should be more affordable than the meat. And the other point, the cultivated meat is, of course, we need to invest because we believe in technology. Maybe in the future, these two other proteins can help to close the gap, because we need to produce more, 70%, 80% of protein food because to feed the growing population. And I think that all of these alternatives could be part of the solution to close this gap.
Sam, what's your view on this? And in particular, from an investment perspective, this has certainly been a pretty hot sector on Wall Street and elsewhere around the world. Investors are really curious about these type of advancements when it comes to proteins and when it comes to food alternatives. But is there still an investment case out there?
Yeah, definitely. There's definitely investment case. I mean, I'm very skeptical on the cultivated side. It's hard for me to see how we can produce that at a price point that can compete with the JBSs of the world. And until you can produce it cheaply, I don't think it has much ability to scale. And I wonder if consumers will adopt it. I do think the problem that's plagued the space, I think Gilberto mentioned this, is that a lot of the products out there just weren't good for you. And I don't think we're making much progress if we're producing slightly maybe more sustainable products, but are good for people to eat. That's not success. And so I do think there's a next generation of companies. You know, one company that we run is called Meaty, that is producing really affordable, highly nutrient-dense sources of protein. That I think has a lot of legs. We're going to need every tool in our toolbox. But I think the point that Aaron made is really right. Like, it is a part, but a relatively small part. I think people are going to continue to eat meat for a long time. I think just as important, we have to find ways to dramatically reduce the footprint of animal agriculture if we're going to meet our goal. And I think we're going to have to do both, have much more diversity of options in our diet, and do a lot of work to reduce the overall footprint.
And we're almost out of time, so let's do one last lightning round around the panel with a final question on the future here, and in particular, a key message for policymakers into COP27 and COP28. So when you look at the situation, FAO says projections suggest that 670 million people will still be facing hunger by 2030. That's 8% of the world's population. So what changes are needed to ensure that hunger does not become the next global pandemic? Erin, I'll start with you.
I think David Beasley says it right when he says we're now potentially stealing food from the hungry to the starving. We must absolutely invest in food security, which again, nutrition security is our global food security. It's everything that we depend. And quite often agriculture has been just flat out forgotten. I think during COVID, there was, 2 billion photos that were taken of our dinner plates. We were actually reminded for the first time how important it is to go to the grocery store. And for many, that was not the case. So we must invest in agriculture. Our farmers' primary job when they get up in the morning is, how do I sustain my community through food? And we have to put them to work. So the only way to do that is to invest in them now. I am very hopeful that, for this first COP, we are finally changing the conversation. Farmers are included. But I'll say this, we cannot go next year without a more centralized, food-centric approach to the climate change talks. And there is no sustainability effort unless it includes farmers directly at the table as a solution, as part of that eco-workforce of our future.
Sam, just finally back over to you. How do we ensure that hunger doesn't become the next global pandemic? And your final message to policymakers at COP27 and heading into COP28?
Look, I think we're still in the middle of a crisis that could get a lot worse through this next year. So we have to do our best to mitigate and support those who are most vulnerable. But I think the number one thing we can do to avoid hunger being the next pandemic is to solve climate change. There is no greater threat to food security over the long term than climate. And I think the thing that worries me is, while yes, we're dealing with an acute problem right now, and it's immoral not to try to do everything we can to mitigate the worst of this moment in the short term. The problem is, if we go from dealing with short-term problem to short-term problem, we miss the long-term need to actually shift the underlying causes of a lot of our inability to feed ourselves consistently. And so we're going to take our eyes off the ball of the long-term investments that have to be made to ensure that in 10 years, this isn't a hunger on the scale that we've never could even dream of. And that's the trajectory we're on. So we have to take sort of emergency efforts today. It's not an excuse, not invest the necessary resources, energy, and attention to transform our way of feeding ourselves into a way that is resilient enough that can meet the moment, both on helping to solve climate, but also preparing themselves, producers, to be able to navigate an era of volatility, which they're now going to have to figure out how to produce high-quality nutrient food for more people in a much more volatile climate with less resources. And that's a challenge of historical perspective. So we got to stay focused on this long-term goal. We're not going to meet the moment of the goal.
Thanks, Sam. And Gilberto, the final word goes to you. How do we ensure that hunger doesn't become the next global pandemic?
I think this is an important point, because the inflation of the food now reduce the affordability for many of populations around the world. And if you want to have peace, you need to have food. Food is essential for stopping migrations, for peace. And if you consider that they represent the agriculture and all of the investments we have done, you see that they represented about more than 20% of agriculture in the economy. But if you look for the investment, maybe less than 2%. There is a gap. I think it is the good things now that COP27 opened the eyes and put agriculture on the center of the discussion as well. Because I thought energy is very important. But agriculture is energy for the people. It's important. We talk about food.
Absolutely. Well, Gilberto, I really appreciate your insights. Thank you so much for being here. Erin as well, fantastic conversation. Thank you so much. And Sam, also joining us down the line. Sam, thank you, and thank you all for joining us. at this World Economic Forum special event live from COP27 at Sharm el-Sheikh. My name is Dan Murphy. I'm an anchor and correspondent at CNBC. You can catch our news at any time over at cnbc.com. Thank you again for tuning in, and stay tuned to the World Economic Forum for more events like this in the future. Thanks for watching.